7 years, you could be a paper satellite without having any negative thought about the fact that you're a paper satellite. I would say it's become a little negative after the 7 years if you haven't brought into use, if there is no satellite. And I think that very often people were referring to paper satellite with the mind that you were still there, you were still preventing maybe some others to get into the business, however, without having anything. And rather than paper satellite, I was calling them fictitious frequency assignments in the master register. But having said that, it's true that you have, during 7 years, you have 7 years to bring into use. One thing that I want to recall is that it's not because there is a maximum period of 7 years that certainly is more related to the coordination of big satellite on the GSO, but it's not because there is a maximum of 7 years that the overall procedures cannot be done in a shorter period. And I remember during my first presentation, we say that, okay, from API up to the notification of your system, in a way, it could take a few months, I would say 10 months or less than a year. So I think that it's something that for me is compatible with your project. Just get that in mind, that the procedures that it exists now for this international recognition through the notification could be done quite quickly. And to the extent that, well, you initiate it on time and not after you've launched your satellite. In any case, if you do it, you can do it at any time to have this international recognition, but it's true that then you may encounter more problem of compatibility with any existing system. You may encounter national problem with whatever national law that exists. But just to say that. You have your API, as it has been explained. There is a commenting period, and then whenever you're ready to do it, and very often at a time of bringing into use or launching your CubeSat or bringing into use your satellite, you should notify. The regulations say that you may notify your system up to 3 years in advance. So providing the information, and within this information, you could have a date of bringing into use, which is date of the submission of the notification plus 3 years. To the extent that, at the end of the day, it's within the 7 years of the regulation. So you can do it in advance. However, you can do it also just at the time of the launch of your system. One thing also, before going to some of the explanation, you may modify the parameters of your system at the notification stage. And here still we are talking about system, non-GSO system, which are not subject to coordinations, but just to simplify, and all of those CubeSat. You may modify the informations. I would say all information except the frequency range. In fact, what has to be notified has to be within the frequency range of your API. However, I know that there were questions about altitude, for example, about the orbit of your system, which, well, were very often dependent about the launcher. And so what has been said, in fact, is that at the API level, you may provide the information that you think would be the best information that you have at the time of the API. However, when you go to notification, you may provide better information. And to a certain extent, when the launch has been done, you have already notified. You may also modify those informations. And it's simple to provide those information to the bureau in order, in a way, to have information which are notified to represent really your system. I don't know if we talked about it because there were discussions within the working group 7B, and there were discussions about one specificity. In fact, we talk about it? No. There was a kind of specificity of many of the CubeSat or SmallSat, the fact that those systems have no propulsion mechanism by themselves. And so, in a way, you launch a satellite, then the satellite is at a certain orbit, However, because there is no those satellites has no propulsion, well, naturally, in a way, they will decrease this altitude. And there were questions about, well, how we can provide this information to the Radio Communication Bureau. In fact, how we can provide, well, it's not to provide this information to the Bureau, we said. It's not, the important is not to provide it to the Bureau. The important is to share this information with the community. And in fact, it exists in the Appendix 4, as it stands now, possibility in a way to provide the maximum height, well, the altitude, and to provide also another information, which is in fact an information which said altitude from which, in a way, altitude up to which, in fact, the service will be provided. And in fact, with those two informations, which provide different altitude, you realize that on one hand, at the beginning of life, you could be at a certain altitude, and with the time, you will be, in a way, at a low altitude. And in addition to that, in a way, what we are proposing is that, in fact, administrations, when they are in such situation, provide a note to explain, in fact, to explain roughly that there is no propulsion on the satellite, and that, in a way, the altitude will be different with the time between, I would say, the two values. And I think that that will give a fair description of the system. So, as I mentioned today, the regulation responds roughly and hopefully to all of the to all of the possible difficulties that you may have to describe your system. When we receive those notification information, in fact, there are two types. Roughly, there are two types of examination regarding those notifications. One examination that we call 1131. In fact, it will you will have an opportunity, as I mentioned, that the regs is a free download online, so you may go there and have an opportunity to look at those particular procedures or particular provisions. In fact, there is a first examination of the information that you are provided, beyond the fact that the AP4 information that you've provided for the notification are complete, that everything is there. However, completeness doesn't mean that the value or the information that you are provided are accurate or are in conformity with the radio regulations. But one of the first things is that when you provide those information is the completeness. And just to say a few words about this completeness, whenever you file your notifications, it's true for API, but it's true also for notification. There are validation tools in order to ensure that you have all information as required by the regs. So please use also those validation tools. When we receive those information, then we are looking, in fact, under 1131, and the conformity, in fact, of the information with the radio regs. And those conformity are mainly conformity with the table of frequency allocations, and also conformity with a certain number of other parameters, particularly beyond the table of frequency allocations, any footnotes, particular footnote to describe the fact that you may use or may not use some frequencies, and also a lot of information regarding constraints that could exist on the use of those particular frequencies. And so, and also have to be taken into account all resolution or recommendations, which are in fact part of the regulations. Recommendations, as the name said, are just recommendations, and so you may follow it or not. Well, I will advise you to follow those recommendations because they have been elaborated in order to facilitate the sharing of frequency, generally speaking. However, only those recommendations which are part of the regulations are of a mandatory nature. And then there is a certain number of articles, etc., that will look a little in more detail. Examination, compliance with table of frequency allocation. Okay, I think that right now you know that whenever you want to do business with your system, you should avoid to use the amateur band. Well, what I mean by that, it's true that, okay, you have to choose the right bands and to choose the right service. Please.
Can I say something?
Sure. Yes, Mario.
Because this is the right time, in my opinion. I want to clarify something. What would happen in the UK, at least? Here, you say that you don't take into account the comments that you publish in the API-B in your analysis, because I agree it's not your job. Mm-hmm. But I want to make clear, because I want to avoid stakeholders to come to the UK and say the notification of my system is automatic. It is not, at least, because if there is interference caused by the proposed system, it's the responsibility of the notified administrations that the interference has to be removed. So you're not obliged to follow these comments received by other administrations. But for example, the UK, sorry, I think this is very important. The UK would avoid to the notification of the system if the comments received by other administrations would be relevant for causing interference. So it's not the job of the ITU to check those comments, but the administration, at least my administration, would make sure that the proposed system doesn't cause interference to administrations who raise this issue. I think this is very, very important. I want to avoid stakeholders to come to Ofcom and to say, well, these are bands not subject to coordination, so what do I care if I cause interference? It's not like that. The notification is up to us, to the administration. So when possible, we need to coordinate even if it's not under the radio regulations. Sorry if I interrupted, but I think this is very important.
No, thank you for this particular issue. It's true, and in fact you're right. It's not because there is no regulatory, mandatory coordinations that are checked, for example, by the Bureau because of the regulations before you're notified. Either you have an agreement or not agreement. So what I want to say that, to simplify the issue, for the GSO, there is a mandatory coordination. So we'll see that if you have agreement or don't have agreement, okay, there are different provisions to take care of that, but there is a specific examination by the Bureau concerning this coordination. Here we are talking about non-GSO system, not subject, when we say not subject to coordination, is not subject to mandatory coordination that will be verified by the Bureau at the end of the day before going into the MIF. However, there is mandatory coordinations. If you look at the provisions which are looking to API not subject to coordination, there is an obligation for administration to make comments. When I say an obligation, if there is any risk of interference, administration may make a comment, and there is an obligation for both administration then to discuss and to find any solution to alleviate whatever issue which is there. And it's true that in a way, either you discuss between yourself or not at some stage, and I think that then it will be the behavior and the role of all notifying administrations when they will notify the system, either to take that into account or not, but I would say that administration should take that into account. But it's true that when you notify your system, the Bureau will have a list of all of those comments that has been published in an API-B, but the Bureau will not look what the status of those comments. However, Mario, you're right also, is that if once a system is notified, got these international recognitions, and is in operations, if there is an issue of harmful interference, it's true that at that time, the Bureau, step by step, will try to find, in a way, what is the issue of interference, and if the regulations has been correctly applied. And it's true that if there is a necessity, in a way, we will look more particularly if there have been some comments during the API phase